Young and the Restless spoilers. The recent developments in Genoa City suggest that a reckoning long delayed is finally beginning to take shape, and at the center of it all stands Lily Winters. No longer the woman who absorbs betrayal quietly or rationalizes the damage inflicted by the people she once loved. The message she sent to Kane Ashby this week was short, unmistakable, and devastating in its finality. There would be no forgiveness. Not now, not later, not ever. The implication cut deeper than Kane likely anticipated, because Lily did not frame her decision as a personal reaction fueled by temporary anger. She framed it as a permanent moral verdict, one reinforced by the emotional reality that their children, having absorbed more instability than any child should, have reached the same conclusion. Kane is no longer merely an estranged partner attempting reconciliation. In their eyes, he has become the architect of chaos who shattered what little sense of safety they still clung to. Lily's words carried the weight of someone who has reached clarity rather than rage. And that distinction matters because clarity does not fade with time. What Kane may not yet fully grasp is that Lily's emotional withdrawal is only the surface manifestation of a much larger shift. Lily is no longer operating solely within the realm of personal hurt. She has crossed into a space where principle, power, and consequence intersect. And that transformation has not gone unnoticed. Victor Newman, ever alert to moments of vulnerability and opportunity, sees Lily not as a grieving ex-wife or a wounded mother, but as leverage. To Victor, pain is not merely something to exploit cruelly. It is something to redirect strategically. He understands that Kane's greatest weakness is no longer his ambition or his questionable business ethics, but the irrevocable loss of Lily's trust. Victor wants to weaponize that loss, to turn Lily into a bargaining chip in a larger negotiation designed to force Kane into submission. Whether Lily initially sought Victor out or Victor quietly maneuvered himself into her orbit is irrelevant. What matters is that the alignment is plausible, logical, and mutually beneficial, at least on the surface. Lily has reason to want Kane punished for his covert actions and duplicity, and Victor has reason to want Kane cornered, exposed, and neutralized. The danger lies in how seamlessly their objectives could overlap without fully aligning. Victor does not operate out of a sense of justice, he operates out of dominance. If Lily chooses to collaborate with him, it will not be because she has become his pawn, but because she believes she can use his power without being consumed by it. That belief may be her greatest risk. Victor is offering Lily something Kane never did: control over the outcome. The promise that Kane will not merely suffer emotionally, but will be forced to account for his actions in a way that strips him of the illusion of superiority he has relied on for years. Yet Victor's interest in Kane extends beyond moral retribution. Kane represents a threat to the Newman legacy not because of who he is, but because of what he has managed to take. This week's confrontation at Newman Enterprises confirmed that threat in unmistakable terms. Kane and Phyllis Summers did not arrive seeking compromise or clarification. They arrived with documentation, authority, and a declaration that shifted the balance of power overnight. As majority shareholders, they now control the very institution that has defined Victor Newman's identity for decades. The announcement was not merely corporate, it was symbolic. Kane, once an outsider desperate for legitimacy, now stands inside the fortress he once tried to infiltrate, holding the keys. Phyllis, ever adaptable and opportunistic, understands the theater of power better than most. She knows that ownership is not just about percentages on paper, but about humiliation, timing, and spectacle. Giving Victor and his family 1 week to vacate the premises was not a logistical necessity. It was a calculated humiliation designed to remind Victor that even empires can be displaced. The ultimatum carried a particular cruelty in its final clause: anything left behind would be donated to charity, as though the remnants of the Newman dynasty were disposable artifacts, rather than symbols of generational dominance. Victor's response to this humiliation has not been explosive, but that restraint should not be mistaken for weakness. He has survived long enough to know that open rage often benefits the enemy. Instead, he has retreated into recalibration mode, quietly assigning roles, redistributing authority, and preparing a counteroffensive that will not rely on nostalgia or sentiment. Victoria Newman has assumed responsibility for managing the immediate fallout, focusing on damage control, investor confidence, and the psychological toll this upheaval is taking on the family. She understands that survival in moments like this requires discipline rather than emotion, and her leadership reflects a grim acceptance that the Newman name is now under siege. Adam Newman, meanwhile, has been entrusted with the oversight of Newman Media, a domain that requires vigilance rather than visibility. Adam's role is not ceremonial, it is strategic. He is monitoring narratives, tracking information leaks, and ensuring that Victor's voice though temporarily displaced from its traditional seat of power, is not silenced. It is in this context that Victor has assigned Adam a new and critical mission. One that suggests Victor is thinking several steps ahead rather than reacting defensively. While the specifics of that mission remain deliberately opaque, its existence alone signals that Victor is preparing to strike back not through brute force, but through precision. Adam's value to Victor has always resided in his willingness to operate in morally ambiguous spaces, without flinching. If Victor believes that Cain's ascent has been built on secrets, then Adam is the instrument designed to uncover them. This mission is not about reclaiming office space or restoring titles. It is about dismantling the legitimacy of Cain's victory piece by piece, until the structure collapses under its own contradictions. What makes this moment particularly volatile is the convergence of personal betrayal and corporate warfare. Cain is not merely fighting Victor Newman. He is standing at odds with the woman whose forgiveness once anchored his sense of redemption. Lily's refusal to absolve him strips away the emotional alibi he has relied on to justify his actions. Without Lily, Cain's narrative becomes exposed, transactional, and self-serving. Victor knows this, and Phyllis likely senses it as well. Even if her motivations remain aligned with immediate gain rather than long-term consequence, the question looming over Genoa City is not whether Cain can maintain control of Newman Enterprises, but whether he can do so while isolated from the moral and emotional alliances that once softened his ambition. Lily's next move will determine far more than Cain's fate. If she chooses to formally align with Victor, she risks becoming entangled in a war that does not end cleanly, one that consumes allies as readily as enemies. If she refuses, she forfeits a rare opportunity to ensure that Cain's reckoning is not merely symbolic, but structural. Either choice carries consequence, and Lily understands that remaining passive is no longer an option. She has already declared that forgiveness is off the table. What remains undecided is the form justice will take, and who will be allowed to define it. As the week unfolds, Genoa City stands on the edge of a transformation that will not be undone by apologies or buyouts. Power has shifted, loyalties are fracturing, and the emotional costs of ambition are finally being tallied. Cain Ashby may believe that ownership equates to victory, but history has shown that in this town, possession is temporary and legitimacy is always contested. Victor Newman has lost his throne, but not his appetite for war. Lily Winters has lost her patience, but not her influence. And in the space between those losses, a new battle is for Mingen, where forgiveness is no longer the currency, and survival depends on how much damage each player is willing to endure in order to win. What Victor Newman is contemplating now is not merely a strategic maneuver, but a psychological gambit that blurs the line between manipulation and moral collapse. Even by his own ruthless standards, the idea of a staged kidnapping does not emerge from impulsive cruelty, but from Victor's deeply ingrained belief that fear is the most efficient currency of control. In his mind, Cain Ashby does not need to be physically destroyed, he needs to be destabilized, emotionally unmoored, and forced into a state where rational negotiation becomes impossible. By making Cain believe that Lily Winters and their twin children are in immediate danger, Victor intends to strip Cain of the composure that has allowed him to posture confidently as a majority shareholder in corporate Victor. This is not about ransom or spectacle. It is about inducing panic so severe that Cain becomes malleable, desperate enough to concede ground he would never relinquish under normal circumstances. Victor is careful, at least verbally, to draw a line that he insists will not be crossed. He assures Adam Newman that Lily and the children will never be in actual danger, that the plan will be contained, controlled, and executed with precision. To Victor, this distinction is everything. He frames the scheme not as an act of violence, but as an illusion engineered to force truth and capitulation. In his worldview, the absence of physical harm absolves him of ethical responsibility, even if the emotional trauma inflicted is real and lasting. Yet this justification rings hollow the moment it is spoken aloud, because Victor's history is littered with plans that were supposed to be safe until they weren't. Adam understands this better than anyone, and it is precisely this understanding that begins to fracture his loyalty as the week progresses. At first, Adam approaches the assignment with the professionalism Victor expects from him. He initiates discreet inquiries, mobilizes contacts, and begins mapping out how such an operation could be staged without alerting authorities or triggering irreversible consequences. But as the details crystallize, so do the risks. Lily is not a passive figure who can be easily moved like a chess piece. She is a mother already operating under emotional strain, a woman who has drawn hard boundaries in response to betrayal and instability. Introducing the illusion of danger into her life, even temporarily, threatens to unravel not just Cain's composure but Lily's hard-won sense of control. The twins, too, are not abstractions in Adam's mind. They are children who have already absorbed more conflict than they should, and the idea of deliberately inserting fear into their reality, even as a staged event, begins to feel less like strategy and more like cruelty. By Thursday, the weight of that realization becomes impossible for Adam to ignore. He starts to question not only the plan's execution but its premise. He knows that once such a narrative is set in motion, it cannot be fully contained. Panic invites interference. Police become involved. Outsiders react unpredictably. A staged threat has a way of attracting real ones. Adam's reconsideration is not driven by sentimentality, but by experience. He has lived long enough inside Victor's orbit to know that the line between illusion and catastrophe is dangerously thin. For the first time in this unfolding crisis, Adam seriously entertains the possibility of defying Victor outright, choosing restraint over obedience regardless of the personal cost. That internal conflict intensifies when Adam decides to bring Chelsea Lawson-Newman into the conversation. This choice is not impulsive, it is deliberate and revealing. Adam knows that Chelsea will not respond with indifference or strategic detachment. She is someone who understands the collateral damage of Victor's schemes, because she has survived them. When Adam informs her of Victor's plan, he does not soften the truth or cloak it in euphemism. Chelsea's reaction is immediate and visceral, and her question cuts straight to the heart of the matter. She asks whether Victor intends to abduct Lily and the twins. Adam's answer, painfully honest, confirms the plan, while attempting to impose limits Victor himself may not respect. He explains that Victor wants him to handle or at least oversee the operation, as though Adam's involvement could sanitize the act. Chelsea is not reassured. To her, the distinction between direct harm and orchestrated terror is meaningless. The idea that Victor would exploit Lily's maternal vulnerability, especially at a time when Lily is already emotionally fortified against Cain, feels not just excessive but unnecessary. Chelsea recognizes what Victor refuses to admit, that this plan is driven as much by wounded pride as by strategic necessity. She also recognizes the position Adam is being forced into, asked once again to serve as both shield and weapon for a man who rarely accepts responsibility for the aftermath. Her anger is not only directed at Victor, but at the pattern that keeps repeating, dragging Adam into moral compromises that isolate him further from the people he is trying to protect. Despite his growing resistance, Adam does not fully disengage. He continues to monitor the situation, determined that if anything resembling this plan moves forward, Lily and the children will remain safe at all costs. This self-imposed obligation becomes a point of no return for him. He is no longer executing Victor's will, he is containing it. That distinction matters even if Victor does not acknowledge it. Adam's priority quietly shifts from manipulating Cain to preventing irreversible damage, and that shift sets him on a collision course with Victor's expectations. The tension escalates when Adam receives a crucial message early in the week, sent by the individual he had tasked with locating and observing the intended targets. The content of that message is not immediately revealed, but its impact is unmistakable. It forces Adam to confront the reality that even preliminary steps toward this plan are already generating consequences. Someone is watching. Information is moving. The illusion Victor wants to construct is beginning to intersect with reality in ways that cannot be neatly controlled. Adam understands that whatever choice he makes next will define not just the outcome of the scheme, but the trajectory of his relationship with Victor moving forward. At the same time, the possibility of a negotiated settlement begins to surface, fragile but real. Victor's ultimate objective has always been leverage, not destruction. If Cain can be pressured into an agreement that restores some measure of control or advantage, Victor may be willing to retreat from the brink. Adam sees this as the last viable exit ramp, the only way to prevent a manufactured crisis from becoming a genuine one. Whether Cain is capable of recognizing that opportunity remains uncertain. Cain's confidence, bolstered by corporate victory and emboldened by Phyllis's support, may blind him to the emotional vulnerability Victor is exploiting. If Cain dismisses a threat outright or calls Victor's bluff, the situation could spiral rapidly. What makes this moment so dangerous is not the plan itself, but the number of people now implicated in its orbit. Lily, whether she knows it or not, has become the emotional fulcrum of a power struggle that extends far beyond her personal grievances. The twins represent innocence in a conflict that has none. Adam stands at the center of competing loyalties, forced to decide whether obedience to Victor is worth the erosion of his own moral boundary. Chelsea, once again, is positioned as a voice of conscience, even as she fears the consequences of speaking out. And Victor, displaced but far from defeated, is proving that the loss of physical territory has only sharpened his willingness to wage war through fear rather than force. As the week unfolds, one truth becomes increasingly clear. Even a fake kidnapping leaves real scars. The mere suggestion of danger has the power to destabilize lives, rewrite alliances, and expose fault lines that can never be fully repaired. Whether the scheme collapses under its own weight or succeeds in forcing a reluctant truce, its existence alone marks a turning point. Victor Newman may insist that no one will be harmed, but the damage is already underway, measured not in physical injury but in trust eroded, boundaries crossed, and the quiet realization that in Genoa City, even safety can be weaponized when power is on the line. The possibility that Lily Winters might willingly agree to participate in a staged kidnapping marks a profound and unsettling evolution in her emotional journey, not because it contradicts who she is, but because it reveals how far she believes Kane Ashby has pushed her. This is not a decision born of recklessness or manipulation. It is a result of accumulated disappointment, rage held in check for too long, and a growing conviction that conventional boundaries have failed to protect her or her children. Lily does not arrive at this choice lightly. She is deeply repulsed by the very concept of using fear as a tool, particularly when it involves her children. Yet her disgust is now rivaled by something colder and more resolute: the belief that Kane must finally be forced to confront the consequences of his actions, in a language he understands. To Lily, Kane's betrayals were not merely personal, they destabilized her family, humiliated her publicly, and repeatedly placed her children in emotional crossfire. In that context, the idea of controlled deception begins to feel disturbingly like a lesser evil. Her willingness to engage with Victor Newman on this level is especially telling, given her lingering resentment over the way he treated her during the earlier political negotiations involving the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. Lily has not forgotten that Victor dismissed her autonomy when it suited him, reducing her value to leverage even then. Under normal circumstances, that history alone would have been enough for Lily to refuse any alliance outright. Yet circumstances are no longer normal. Lily and Victor now share a perception that overrides past grievances. They both see Kane as a destabilizing force whose ambition has crossed into recklessness. They also see Phyllis Summers as an accelerant, someone who encourages Kane's worst instincts under the guise of empowerment and strategic brilliance. In this rare alignment, Lily is willing to set aside personal offense in favor of a larger objective, not because she trusts Victor, but because she believes their mutual distrust can function as a form of balance. What makes this alliance possible is Lily's insistence on control. She does not agree to be victimized, staged, or otherwise. Instead, she reframes the plan so that she is not the object of the deception, but a conscious participant in it. By agreeing to pretend to be part of a kidnapping scenario, Lily effectively neutralizes the most dangerous element of Victor's original scheme: the need for actual abduction. This shift is critical. It allows Adam Newman to step back from the brink of committing a crime he morally cannot justify, and it satisfies Victor's strategic requirement that Kane believe Lily and the twins are in imminent danger. The illusion remains intact, but the harm is redirected away from Lily and the children and toward Kane's psychological defenses. In Lily's mind, this is not cruelty, it is containment. Victor's explanation to Lily is characteristically blunt. He tells her that Kane must believe the danger is real in order to break his momentum. Kane's recent actions at Newman Enterprises, supported and amplified by Phyllis, have demonstrated that he is not responsive to warnings, appeals, or even humiliation. He responds only to pressure, and the pressure must be personal. Victor openly admits that he has reached the conclusion that drastic measures are unavoidable. If Kane is to be stopped, this is not framed as revenge, but as necessity. Victor argues that every delay allows Kane to entrench himself further, to rewrite power structures in ways that will be impossible to undo later. To Victor, the staged kidnapping is not escalation, it is intervention. Adam's role in this reconfigured plan becomes more complex, but also more palatable to his conscience. His primary objection was never strategic, it was ethical. He could not accept frightening Lily or the children, nor could he accept the risk of the situation spiraling beyond control. Lily's consent alters that equation. While Adam remains deeply uncomfortable, he recognizes that this version of the plan minimizes real-world danger while preserving leverage. Still, his involvement is cautious and conditional. Adam insists on safeguards, on strict limits to what information is released and how it is communicated, and on absolute clarity that the twins will never be placed in a position where they feel genuinely threatened. His participation is not an endorsement of Victor's philosophy, but a calculated attempt to prevent a worse outcome. The core objective remains unchanged: to force Kane into negotiation. By making him believe that Lily and the children are targets, Victor intends to shatter the illusion of control Kane has cultivated. Since becoming a majority shareholder, the fear that he has finally endangered the people he claims to love is meant to paralyze him. to redirect his focus away from conquest and toward preservation. Victor is acutely aware that Cain prides himself on being a provider and protector, undermining that self-image is the most efficient way to compel compliance. If Cain believes his ambition has triggered a crisis he cannot fix alone, he may finally be willing to listen. From Lily's perspective, this is where the plan's moral justification lies. She is not seeking to terrify Cain for sport, she is seeking to stop him. She believes that if Cain continues unchecked, the damage he will inflict emotionally, financially, and psychologically be far greater than the discomfort induced by this deception. Lily also understands that traditional appeals have failed. She has drawn boundaries, issued warnings, and removed herself emotionally, yet Cain persists. In agreeing to this plan, Lily is choosing a final confrontation over endless erosion. She is choosing resolution, even if that resolution is forged in moral gray. At the same time, Lily is under no illusion that this alliance with Victor is safe. She knows that Victor's concept of protection is conditional, and that his definition of success rarely accounts for emotional fallout. That awareness sharpens her resolve to remain actively involved rather than allowing the plan to proceed without her oversight. Lily does not trust Victor to act in her best interest, she trusts him to act in his own. Her participation ensures that her children's welfare remains central rather than incidental. In a paradoxical way, agreeing to the plan gives her more agency than refusing it ever could. The tension surrounding Phyllis's role continues to simmer beneath the surface. Lily views Phyllis not simply as Cain's ally, but as a catalyst who validates his most destructive impulses. Victor, too, recognizes that any effort to neutralize Cain without addressing Phyllis's influence will be incomplete. The staged crisis is designed not only to isolate Cain emotionally, but to test Phyllis's loyalty. Will she prioritize Cain's safety and family, or will she encourage him to resist, to gamble, to double down? The answer to that question will reveal how deeply entangled Phyllis truly is in Cain's long-term strategy. Ultimately, this plan exists because all other options have been exhausted. Victor sees it as the only remaining path to regain leverage without bloodshed. Adam tolerates it as a controlled alternative to genuine harm. Lily accepts it as a final measure to protect her children from a future shaped by Cain's unchecked ambition. None of them believe the plan is clean, noble, or without consequence. They proceed not because it feels right, but because doing nothing feels worse. As this alliance solidifies, the stakes in Genoa City escalate dramatically. A fake kidnapping, even one entered into willingly, still carries the power to fracture trust, rewrite relationships, and leave scars that no explanation can fully erase. Cain's reaction will determine whether this gambit succeeds in forcing negotiation, or ignites an even more volatile chain of events. What is certain is that the moment Lily agrees to play a role in her own perceived endangerment, the moral landscape of this conflict shifts irrevocably. The question is no longer whether lines will be crossed, but how far each player is willing to go before the cost becomes irreversible, and whether, in trying to stop a danger, they have created a new one altogether.